Hi, welcome to First Pour Wine. I'm Nick,
And I'm Jay.
and on this episode we're going to be looking at dessert wines, specifically cream sherry and ruby port.
Well, you say port now. Technically, that's a Cape Ruby. It's not from Portugal.
See, there's some really uptight people in Portugal, and they don't want anyone to use port. It used to be that if it was from Portugal, you can only use Porto. Now you can only use anything but port.
So this Cape Ruby is made in a port style, which is to say it's made using the same traditions and the same blend of varietals, but not in Portugal.
Yeah. And so it's going to contain a bunch of tintas from the Douro region of Portugal, except from South Africa, and a little bit of Tempranillo in this particular blend.
I thought that was interesting, given that it's a ruby. You wouldn't expect sort of a white wine to be hanging out in the blend, but...
Oh, right.
Red?
Tempranillo.
Oh, damn.
I hope it's a lot on this. Don't worry about it. So let's open this up, and while you're opening that up, there's basically two styles of port. There's a third style of port, which is white port, but no one really ever talks about it. It's mainly used for mixing. You rarely ever see it. The style we've got on today is a ruby. Rubies are younger. They're not aged as long in oak. They're very fruity. Tawnies are aged longer in oak. They pick up more toffee and raisin and caramel characteristics. So they're both very different wines. And all of these wines on today's episode are fortified wines. Now what that means is, are you going to take that?
Yeah. Fortified wine is simply just a wine that's had additional alcohol added into the mix. In these cases, in fact, traditionally throughout most fortified wines, it's a grape brandy, so it's still in fact grape derived, but it is a neutral spirit that simply enhances the alcoholic content and also actually preserves and sort of deadens, in some cases, the wine.
Yeah, what they're specifically trying to do is yeast eats sugar, and so what they're doing is they're killing the yeast. And by killing the yeast, you leave more sugar in the wine, and you get a higher alcohol content from the alcohol you've added, which in turn kills the yeast and makes this big cyclical process, which basically ends any changes to the wine other than from the maturation, whether it be in bottle or in casks of some sort.
There's also this being, I think you'd agree, traditional fortified wines are sweet.
Yes.
Quite sweet,
They
actually.
want to preserve the sugar.
Because there's a lot of residual sugar still involved.
Well, fortified dessert wines, though. There's cases specifically with sherries, where there's dry sherries. There's also a couple other things, but yeah, by and large you're right. By and large they're sweet. But there's some key examples that we'll talk about on another episode. But without further ado, why don't we give this a shot? This is one of me and Jay's favorite ports. We have been drinking this for, I think, at least a year now.
2? Maybe 2.
Yeah, it was one of the first ports I bought. It's $8 a bottle.
It is, of course, a nice ruby color, quite dark, and
It smells quite different.
well, that's the other thing, is you never know. This particular port is a non-vintage.
By the way, top tip: if you are smelling a fortified wine and you either do not have a fairly large glass, or you have poured a fairly large glass of wine, do not stick the wine directly onto your nose.
Yes, be careful. That extra alcohol will make itself known.
If you burn out your smell sense, it won't come back for anywhere from a minute to an hour. What are you getting out of this?
In particular,
I'm getting a really...
on the nose, there's a dried fruit, not raisin. Maybe a dried plum. A little bit around the edges there.
I'm getting like a dried cherry or something.
Or a cherry, yeah. Some dark red fruit, but definitely dried.
It's very musky though.
Yeah, there's an additional... I almost want to call it... It's not smoky exactly. Maybe a little bit of tobacco, which...
That's it. It's got that kind of burning tobacco smell.
Yeah.
And a little bit like a cigar.
A little bit of burnt tobacco. It does. It reminds me of a cigar.
Because this is non-vintage, it may have spent more time in oak than we know.
Minimum, I think, 6 months or a year, but
Yeah, this is non-vintage.
often up to several years, since it'll be a combination of several barrels.
Give it a shot.
Alright, well, sweet as expected. The berries definitely stick with me. Red berries. A bit more ripe berry now that it's in the mouth.
Yeah.
But maybe a cherry now. Still a dark cherry, like a black cherry, but now kind of ripe and juicy.
It's got that slightly turny strawberry thing going on. Where they get just a little past ripe, but they're juicy and delicious, and you love them. And it's also got some of those tobacco notes, though.
Yeah, those hang out, which surprises me, but is nice. A little bit of smoke and.
I also do get a fair amount of raisin.
Yeah,
It's fairly raisiny.
that I think is quite traditional. You look for a dried fruit of that kind, raisin in particular, in a ruby port style wine.
Now it doesn't have a lot of lasting finish or complexity to it. But what it does have is just kind of very strong fruit flavors in it. It's very nicely balanced for its age, and especially for its region. So at $8 a bottle, it's the kind of bottle you can pick up pretty much any day and just pull out and have some of. It's wonderful for that regard. That's what drew me to it, and it's just a great value. I've had ports that are $20 that I haven't thought were as good.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I found this, because it to me tastes like it could be a $30 or $40 bottle of port, and it's 8 to, I've seen it as high as maybe 10 or 12 if they're really pushing it, but you should be able to get it for under 10, pretty much anywhere you find it. And I don't know, I find it to be quite excellent, really anytime after a meal. Maybe not, tried it with too sweet a dessert. It is sweet, but I worry that too much extra sweetness would be bad for it. It's actually very good with a nice cheese.
It's also nice with chocolate, too.
Yes. I found dark chocolate in this actually went very well together.
So I guess what we're trying to say is KWV, we would not be opposed to you guys sending us just like a whole case of this.
No, it would definitely be
we would
good
love
use.
But anyway, so this is very good. And without further ado, I think I want to move on to the Osborne.
You should, yes.
Okay, now that is a cream sherry.
Make those
I'm
tops.
sorry, I have no choice again.